So we're going to talk about the Tormented Synapse next. So the Tormented Synapse obviously is a little bit different in that it's not like a weapon, but it's an item that can be converted into three weapons. I wanted to talk about the Tormented Synapse because I think that it's a Demon Bane weapon is an item that you can purchase potentially pretty early in your account's progression as a way to open up more content that you can engage with. And I think a lot of people already realize this and make the decision to do so. I just wanted to, do this item review as potentially a way to give a little guidance as to which of these items you should prioritize among the three of them. So let's just talk about specifically what bosses are opened up by each of the three options that you have available, because that's probably what you're interested to know. So we've got the Purging Staff, the Ember Light, and the Scorching Bow. So I'm not going to go too much into the stats of these items. I'm just going to say off the top that the Ember Light does have the requirement of you having done quite a hefty amount of Catacomb Slayer before you can actually make it. So, we also are going to try to keep in mind the fact that, Arclight exists, and without the Synapse, these two items are a U short bow and a battle staff. So this has like a better baseline to work with, and so when we're considering it as an upgrade, we have to consider that it's upgrading from a better item, which gives it less room for improvement. So we have to hold that against the Emberlight a little bit, but you'll still find that it generally performs fine. So let's just go ahead and get into Paint 3D and look at the pictures that I put together for us all today. So yeah, the Synapse right now is 45 mil. That's, like I said, pretty approachable, pretty early. So let's talk about the Scorching Bow first. The Scorching Bow has four main use cases that I would personally identify. It is best in slot at Tormented Demons. It's best in slot with an Emberlight switch, as well as at Demonic Gorillas, also with an Emberlight switch. Ideally, you will run an Emberlight and a Scorching Bow at those locations, so you can consider a Scorching Bow to be a best in slot weapon at those locations. So if you're planning on doing potentially, maybe this is where you got your first money for your first Synapses at Tormented Demons. Well, if you want to do more of it, this is going to be a big upgrade there. If you want to. And then Demonic Gorillas as well if you're planning on doing any grinding there. So Krill, this bow makes it very AFK. The problem is that Krill's not a great money maker, and if we're talking about what you're going to spend your early money on, if our goal is to make it so you can engage with more of the game's content, which in my experience, most players that are trying to enjoy the game, and that's what they're going for mainly, is they want the gear so they can engage with the content. Well, Krill's not a great money maker, and your early, like, how much money you make early is going to determine how quickly you could start to engage with more content, basically. So while it's really great at Krill and makes Krill super chill, you're not a pet hunter quite yet, if you're at that point where you're still deciding what to buy with your first Synapse, probably. So it's like 2 mil an hour, 3 mil an hour to do Krill. You can do a lot better than that at a lot of places. So yeah, it does very, very good at Krill. You can bind him with it and essentially make it so he never moves and kill him very quickly. But yeah. At Abyssal Sire, ever since the Abyssal Sire rework, you can one-shot the vents with Demon Bane weapons. The only Demon Bane weapon this really matters for, considering you have to be on the Ancient Spellbook, is the Scorching Bow, which can serve this utility role of one-shotting all of the vents at Sire. So it's pretty nice quality of life at Sire. It's going to save you a decent amount of time in those vent phases. I would say that's not the hugest factor in like how you spend your first, Synapse, but it's still potentially a useful thing. Even taking into account the fact that this upgrades from Arclight, it kind of upgrades so significantly that, the comparison is still pretty favorable for Emberlight at the end of the day. It does more damage than any other weapon in the game at Tormented Demons, Demonic Gorillas, and on Abyssal Sire. So if you're planning on doing a lot of those three bosses, two of those are pretty decent-ish money makers, Tormented Demons and Demonic Gorillas, so you could make some progress there that way. And then at Abyssal Sire, if you're looking to grind pets, then that's also a great place to take the weapon. And then it also opens up Duke and Cerberus in a pretty big way. It's second best at those two locations behind Scythe, and it trails Scythe pretty closely. So you'll be doing these bosses at near max efficiency, Duke and Cerberus. That's big. That's big. Duke and Cerberus are two bosses where you can make money and are pretty enjoyable to do, like according to most people, at least according to the standards of like demonic gorillas and Abyssal Sire. So you know, that's not bad. It's not half bad that it opens up those two bosses for you, like pretty much outright. And at Duke, I wouldn't even bother going with Arclight. You basically need to have Emberlight. And in Skatizo, there's utility in having an Emberlight as well as its excellent damage on the boss. It's not the most important boss considering it's time gated, but still, if you're doing some Skatizo, an Emberlight's nice to have. So yeah, that's a really compelling case for the weapon, basically. Oops. Sorry, I should have done that a lot sooner. I just now thought about it. It's a really compelling case for the weapon. I can't deny that. But let's go ahead and look at what the Purging Staff now has to offer. So the Purging Staff, I mean, it's probably a little memey, like a little bit of a meme for me to say the Purging Staff has an argument and then put up the fact that it has two use cases, and not neither of them actually are even best in slot. But it's Tormented Demons and Yama. So at Tormented Demons, a Purging Staff is like basically just as good as a Scorching Bow. It's better on the unshielded phase and worse on the it's better on the shielded phase and worse on the unshielded phase. So it ultimately comes out to be about the same as a Scorching Bow. So it's still really good at Tormented Demons, basically best in slot as an upgrade there. And then Yama, Shadow is the weapon that beats Purging Staff. So if you don't have a Shadow, Purging Staff essentially opens up Yama for you. It's also true that if you do have a Shadow, you kind of still need a Purging Staff to do Yama. I mean, assuming you can get around it technically, but it requires quite a bit of finesse. So I would say you basically want to have that Purging Staff to go to Yama, even if you do have a Shadow. So for utility and DPS purposes both, Purging Staff and Yama pretty much coupled up. You're going to have the Purging Staff, I'd say, before you really go there. So if you're interested in Yama as content, and it is an in-game piece of content that's a very solid moneymaker, then you can go with the Purging Staff. Not all use cases are created equal, in my opinion. And while the Emberlight definitely has like more use cases that it opens up and more good ones at that, none of these are quite as good of a singular use case as Yama is for the Purging Staff, because Yama's like doing an efficient duo Yama with two Purging Staffs is probably about 8 to 9 mil an hour, and that's more than you're gonna make at any of these places by quite a bit. With the exception of Duke, if you put together a full Soul Reaper axe. You know, probably a long ways away, I'd imagine, especially if we're talking about a first Synapse. So, yeah, the Purging Staff does open up a really high quality boss in Yama, but ultimately it doesn't quite have the breadth that the Emberlight has. And a lot of people like to keep it fresh. They like to have multiple bosses to engage with. Like I said, you know, engage with the game. They want to engage with the game. Well, the Emberlight's going to let them do that with more bosses, as opposed to just grinding the crap out of Yama, which a lot of people probably wouldn't like. But if you're interested in potentially doing that, then yeah, you can go with the Purging Staff. It is a potential option. So yeah, that's my weigh in on the Tormented Synapse. I hope that was helpful as an item review, and I will see you.